East Texas. Happy Independence Day. I'm Brooke Deering, and Gianni Wendell has the night off. East Texas Museum is joining in on America's 250th birthday celebration. Visitors to the American Freedom Museum in Bullard were greeted with a cannon firing and flags flown across history. East Texas News Weekend's Michael Richardson reports.
Inside the American Freedom Museum in Bullard is a message. You are about to embark on a 250-year journey. The museum celebrated the 250-year milestone today with free admission and a cannon firing. Before the nation settled on the Stars and Stripes flown today, there were several flags tied to American history. Michael Hurley, with the Sons of the American Revolution, felt it was important to show how the country was learning its identity.
They were crawling in their infancy, learning what their flag was going to look like, how the troops were going to dress.
The American Freedom Museum lies on the campus of the Brook Hill School, where Stephen Dement is founder.
The fact that we've reached this milestone shows that our government, the people's government, is strong and will exist forever.
Visitors could learn all about American history, from the Revolutionary War to modern commanders-in-chief. And in a section on the Vietnam War, folks could hear from veterans, including Richard Schmidt, who served as a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force.
I think it's critically important for people to understand that freedom isn't free. We have to be able to tell people that what goes on in the world is not a nice place, and it's critically important for them to understand our history.
The American Freedom Museum is looking to remember what came before, as the United States looks beyond 250 years. Michael Richardson, East Texas News Weekend.
The American Freedom Museum is open to the public on Saturdays. This month, folks can also come in on Wednesdays.